Hi, so in this lecture we are going to talk about the next um, weight training, you can say weight training discipline, and that is powerlifting. So in the previous one we've gone and seen the different ones. There's bodybuilding we've covered, there's weightlifting of course which will be covered in the next lecture, but now we're going to go to powerlifting, which is what you see in the center. Okay, so what is powerlifting? Power is obviously what is defined as strength plus speed, or force and velocity, force times velocity. But what we'll be doing is we'll be finding out exactly what is powerlifting. Is powerlifting about speed and strength together, or is it only about strength, only about speed? Let's find out. So I'm going to jump to the powerlifting uh, slide. Just bear with me. Yes, so here we are with powerlifting. Now, what is powerlifting? How is it different to bodybuilding and weightlifting? So, powerlifting, the name is a bit of a misnomer because it is called powerlifting, but it is actually, if you think about it, it can be called force lifting, maximum force lifting, or it could be called strength lifting if we had to use a term. Reason being that in powerlifting, you are actually not lifting with speed. So what is it that you do in powerlifting if it is not lifting with speed, as the name suggests, power lifting? So in powerlifting, actually you have three lifts. It comprises of the squat, the bench press, and the deadlift. If you're a strength and conditioning coach, specialist, you should definitely be knowing this. If you're a physiotherapist, you should be knowing these terms. And you should be, of course, mastering these over time, because these are lifts that are used a lot of times. Sometimes when they don't suit a particular person, you don't have to, but you should be knowing about these. So what is a squat? A squat is the lift where you take the bar, a power lifter will take it, place the bar under their, or rather on top of their shoulder blades, okay, and then they'll hold and they'll squat down. As the name suggests, squat down, come up. How many times do they go down and up? Once. So truly speaking, it's a 1 RM max. So 1 repetition maximum, that is what it is. The amount of weight lifted becomes the most important thing here. How much should you do in this? How much of weight? It depends on the person. So when they get into a squat position, they would be wearing what's called a lifting costume, okay, and these costumes which are there, or these powerlifting suits which are also called, they are extremely tight. And it is interesting to note that in powerlifting, the whole idea being able to lift the maximum weight that you can, it is not just about doing it with your body where you just go and lie down in a t-shirt and lift. On your competition day, there's a suit that is worn, and that suit does assist, to a certain extent. It will give the lifter a lot more safety and a little bit of assistance, where because of the rigidity and the stability that the suit provides, the person can lift a little bit more weight than what they would be able to lift in just a plain t-shirt or regular track pants. So wearing a suit is almost, you could say, for any international competitions is almost, and even national competitions is part of it. These suits are pretty expensive, and they cannot be used really a lot of times because they're very tight and they are specifically, built to withstand a lot of the weight that the lifter carries. So in powerlifting, there are these three lifts: squat, bench, dead, what is called squat, bench, dead, but which is in full form squat, bench press, deadlift. And these three lifts, when somebody does with those costumes, with the costume, generally even for a bench press, it will be a bench press suit which is almost till here. The picture that you see here, the girl that is doing the bench press, there's no suit. You can make out that the arms are just open, and she's lifting an X amount of weight. It looks like she's lifting, if we have to check it, you can see from the plates. And this is where observation, for anybody who's into lifting, they will know that, they can know from this that there's 5 kilos here and 5 kilos, which is written. So that's a 5 kilo plate here. And if you can observe, this is a thinner plate, this is a thinner plate. Okay, so that means this is most likely 5 and this is also 5 kilos. Okay, the ones in the center of that might be 10, so 5, maybe 10 or 15. So this is 5, and let's assume 10, 10, 10. So this would be approximately the weight of these three will be 30, and this 5 and this 5 will be 40. So it's 40 kilos this side, 40 kilos this side, that's 80. The Olympic bar, a standard Olympic bar, will always have a weight of 20 kilos. Okay, and then there's what's called the collars here. These collars will weigh another 2.5 and 2.5. Some Olympic bars which are used in gyms are sometimes lighter. They can be 15 kilos, which are used for general population training. But competition bars are generally that weight as far as the weight goes. Okay, so now this part of weight, when you are observant, you will know that this person is lifting approximately 40, that's 80, and then the bar around 20, and if we take the collars, so that around 105 kilos is what she's doing a bench press, and that is the aim of the whole lift. Now she is of course not wearing suit, so we get to know that without the suit she is lifting, so she is doing a practice lift. It is also in a gym. So this is a strong power lifter who's lifting, maybe just if she's able to do this weight and there's no spotter behind, meaning there's no person to check on her. So that means most likely she has herself taken the weight out of the rack, and she's going to do a repetition. So she's pretty confident with this weight. So maybe her 1 RM max, okay, her 1 repetition max would most likely be probably somewhere around 125, maybe somewhere around there, 125, 130. But we can take a slight guess. It might not be the most appropriate guess, or it's more an approximate guess. Now, why I had to show this is that as a strength coach, you should be able to read in a gym when people lift, because we then get to know whether it's a bodybuilder, whether it's a weightlifter, a power lifter. When people train, a good strength and conditioning coach will be able to understand what's happening. A good strength and conditioning coach won't be lost, because what's the first word in SNC? Strength, right? So you need to be knowing almost everything around that. It's like a subject matter which you have to be knowing, and you have to be knowing the scientific basis, the practical basis as well. You should not just be somebody who knows about your subject and has no idea about the main term of the field, which is strength and conditioning. So experience teaches this. For me, having myself when I was younger doing powerlifting, of course it has played a role in my life. I have done some normal college level bodybuilding competitions. It has definitely played a role in my life. It gives me an understanding how maybe a bodybuilder thinks, how powerlifters think, how weightlifters think, how athletes think. So this is important because this makes you a master. Instead of one, you become a jack of all trades, and then gradually that jack of all trades itself becomes a supermaster or like a grandmaster, because you end up knowing about everything and keeping track and being aware of things that happen in the gym. If you're a strength and conditioning coach, this is non-negotiable of knowing all the info out there about different sports which happen or different disciplines that are related to the gym. So now comes the lift. Like I said, first was squat, bench press, deadlift. Let's just go into the squat. So squat, a bar will be held, the person goes down and up. Now how low? Can the person just squat down a bit? Is this a squat good enough to come up and down, and will this be passed? Obviously no. The hip generally has to go below parallel to the knee. So you will see that powerlifters will go till where their upper thigh is almost parallel. There will be generally 3 judges, one sitting in front, 2 on each side, and they will give the main judge will give a hand signal to say squat, and then the person goes down and the judge will look, and then from all angles they will look, and when they come up, then the judge will say rack, and then the weight is put back. These 3 judges will decide the depth of the lift, whether it passes or not. Now when it is passed, there are generally lights There's a green light which will say, it's passed. If it's red, it's a no lift. Okay. So it is very important here to understand that this lift, unlike what sometimes we do, and we say that, okay, I can squat 130 kilos. We might say that, but a lot of times these are not judged. So we say, but maybe there's no uniformity in our lift. Today how we lift versus the next time we lift, we don't know. But powerlifting being something where there's judges, there's a good level of uniformity. So when somebody says that this person has lifted this amount of weight, 150 kilo squat, and then somebody says that the other person in a competition of the same weight category has lifted 160, then it is generally a good objective outcome. It is sort of rarer to be seen that this person didn't go down as much and the judges favored him or her, and this person actually went lower. These are things which are much more rarer because there's also 3 judges. So this is something to be understood. And now what can we learn from this? I'll get to it a bit later. Okay, but first squat. So squat now, in general training, of course, a lot of strength and conditioning coaches incorporate the squat. There's a slight difference in the powerlifting squat that the bar placement is slightly lower. In Olympic squats, the bar placement is higher, and that tends to put a lot more load on the quadriceps when you go down and up. But in a powerlifting squat, the bar is placed lower, the hands can sometimes be wide, and the foot stance is definitely wide. Now, why do you think a powerlifter would be having a wide stance in his squat compared to general people who do closed stance squats? What is it that they gain from this? Now, this part I'm not going to explain. This part I want you guys to do some reading up, get some info out there. It is not very difficult, but find out why is it that powerlifters squat with a wide stance compared to the average stance which is done in Olympics squats, and even in bodybuilding when people do squats they don't go as wide. So what is the reason? And this will be one of the questions in the tests. I would be asking about this. I would want to know. This will give me also an idea how many people are actually following and really looking for info. Okay, so you've got the hint there. Do some research on that. Now, powerlifting squat is a lot more hip work and there's a lot of lower back work as well. Okay, and the reason why is because in powerlifting, in a squat, when somebody goes down, there's a lot more flexion at the hip, so there's a lot more leaning forward. Okay, the butt going back and then coming up. Okay, so there's a lot of support that comes from the back, of course the quadriceps, but also the gluteus maximus as well. Okay, and there's other muscles as well, especially being a wide stance, the adductors also come into play, so it becomes slightly different from a perspective of how it loads the body. And though you are able to lift more, one of the things to maybe ask as a strength and conditioning coach when we take this type of squat to be applied to athletes is how much is the benefit, how much is the risk. The more you lift, obviously it's a great feel that you can lift more, but how you lift is also what matters. So this style of lifting, is it applicable to athletes? Is it something which will help? Generally, it's a bit tricky to use this type of lifting because of the amount, like I said, of load which comes on the back. Okay, so you have to be a bit cautious when you employ this style of squatting, going down, and of course the magnitude of the weights. Do you want to be lifting as heavy as a power lifter? Is that really what is required in your sport? So that is again something which one needs to check. Okay. Now coming to the next lift, the bench press. Now the difference between a squat, deadlift, and including even the Olympic lifts, and the bench press is that in a bench press, as the name suggests, you need a bench. It's not a lift between just the human body and the bar. In a squat, it's a bar which is on your shoulder, you squat, come up, that's the lift. Deadlift, you hold a bar, lift, you put it back, that's the lift. Here you need a bench. Without a bench, there's no bench press. So how is this different to a regular bench press which is done by many people. One, of course, it's a flat bench press like what most people would do. Something of interest to note would be for many strength and conditioning coaches that a bench press which is done flat and your shoulder capsule health, how effective is it? Is a bench press the best exercise that can be done for every person, or do we have to be a bit more cautious with those who have had shoulder issues? So this is again something we should know, that there are other forms of bench press as well, such as the incline bench press, dumbbell variations, sometimes machines where again you can do incline. There's of course a decline bench press as well, and the way the load affects the shoulder will be different in these different movements. But coming to the flat bench press here, which is used as a test of maximum strength for your upper body. So how is it done? Will you lie down? Okay, you'll again have your bench press suit, you lie down, you hold a bar. One main difference you will notice when you see this picture itself is that this girl, the way she's holding, her arms are really out wide, right? This is almost the angle. It is not here and this. Even at its sort of starting point, you can see it's almost here, right? This is the angle if you can see my arms. Now, why is it that it is this wide? Again, this is similar to the question I asked you about why is it that people have their feet wide while doing squats in powerlifting. So one of the reasons is that the wider your arms are, what happens at the starting point? The bar is lower, meaning it is lower as in it is closer to the chest. So when it comes down, there's less distance. If my arm is here, if I may do this from the side, it probably gives you a better idea. Imagine I keep a bar which is at this height, and now from here I go down, touch my chest, come. You can see the distance it has traveled. Now what if I had to have it here? You can make out the difference, right? So much of distance to travel, less distance to travel from here to the chest, okay, versus from here to the chest. And now you might say that, okay, a little bit of difference, not much. But when you have tons of kilos in your hands, that little distance makes a huge difference. So that's why this part of doing bench press is about technique. It's of course a lot about strength. It's also about how you place your body. So interesting to note that in powerlifting, how the shoulder blades, the scapulae are attracted as much, and a lot of times one is that the hand goes wide in the grip, so there's less distance. So how is it that we can make this distance even more efficient? So I have to travel less. So one is to make this wide, and what's the other thing if you see in the picture that the girl is doing? The other thing is she has also lifted the chest as much as possible. So what a lot of powerlifters do is they arch their back as much or retract the shoulder blades so that the whole rib cage comes higher. So then you end up saving distance. If I do it with maybe this arm, you'll know, look at this, if wide arm I do and here, this is all the distance I have to travel. But what would happen if I keep it here? There's a greater distance that I have to travel with the bar. So these are the two sort of main things that powerlifters do. They really go high and they go wide. And then what is done is, just like a squat, it's a 1 repetition max. So you will bring the bar down, up, and then you put it back. Now, unlike a squat, okay, where you sort of go down and you come up. Here in the eccentric, when you're going down, there will be a referee who will be sitting, and when you take the weight off, there will of course be helpers. You just don't take it out yourself because it's quite heavy. So when you take it out from the rack, which is from there, and you take it out and come here, there will be helpers who will do. So they help you to literally keep the weight there. You have a nice grip, and then once you're okay, they leave and move out, okay. And once they leave and move out, you just don't start. You have to wait for the referee to say start, and then you go down. And once you go down, as far as I remember, at least during my days when I've tried a bit of amateur level powerlifting, you go down and the referee then says push, that's the only time you push. So it's not about taking the bar and like how generally bench presses are done. It's not this. This is not a bench press for powerlifting. It is here, and then maybe for 1 second or so it's held, and then the referee says push. So it's like push, boom. Now what is different in this? Unlike a bench press where you just go down, up, the stretch reflex component is something that assists the regular bench press. So you go down, bounce back, okay. So down, bounce back. That's how we normally do weight training. In powerlifting, it takes that elastic component out. So it's eccentric, pause, concentric. So it's very amazing the amount of power that some people can have to do that without bouncing the bar off the chest. Hold, boom, is absolutely phenomenal. It can help for those people who are looking at, concentric starting strength, meaning where they are stationary and just produce power from there, without going back. In the previous lectures, I have discussed about this in punching. So somebody who has this type of strength where they are not bouncing, they might not be very fast with their shoulders, but they would be able to produce power from a static position at a very, very high rate, because they are so used to stopping and then starting again, unlike somebody who's used to eccentric here and then using that momentum to go back. So this is something to be understood, and this is something to know when to use. If you require with some of your athletes this type of training where you want some starting strength, which is concentric, where they can just explode from a stationary position, then this type of training can be utilized with, of course, some modifications according to your athlete. So this can be one of the good sides and the good points to be done. Something that can be a bit tricky for athletes to do and should ideally not be done is the wide grip. For most athletes, because you want to keep that shoulder safe for playing cricket or for playing badminton, tennis, you want shoulder plays a huge role in most sports. So this doesn't become one of the best grips. Your shoulder capsule, the load there is on all the ligaments around there is not the best at this point, okay. When you're going here, and if this is how your shoulder is traveling, okay, it is not definitely the safest position. Your shoulder would always be much more safer if the arm and the bar travels in such a way that the elbow is below the wrist, so that the push happens in a straight line and there's skeletal support under. When it's here, okay, it is something where that you don't get support from the bone structure much, okay. But then if you're wanting to lift the heaviest weights, this becomes the fastest, this becomes the most efficient way to do it. So this is something we need to understand, and once you understand this, like I've said earlier, if you know, then you know what good to take and what not to take. But knowing is important, okay. You don't have to just think that this is something that, oh, those powerlifters, those heavy lifting people do that, and that's not for us. So if your student has to ask you saying, no, I know somebody who does powerlifting and is really strong, and can we not use that lift to get strong for our sport? Then you need to have answers. You cannot be just saying, oh, powerlifters, that is for those guys, or you can't just shut your students saying, don't talk too much, don't ask about things that are not your thing. So that, people, you don't want your students to be thinking that maybe you don't know about something. So it's important, just like I said in earlier lectures, for sports, when you are going to work with a sport, any sport, you need to know the intricacies, the times when they move, the movement patterns, the scoring system, so you know where your help can come in. At the same time, in the gym, what's happening is not even a choice, okay. You have to be knowing if people are lifting heavy in the gym, there's a person who's lifting heavy, you need to know why they're lifting. Are they competitive, or are they just people who are lifting heavy, or is it what's called ego lifting? And ego lifting is something very interesting. It's a term that is used for people who just lift heavy for the sake of it. They just feel good to show in the maybe gym or to themselves that I lift heavy. And ego lifting has its own problems, that you are lifting for no purpose. If you are lifting and pushing your body to the maximum that you can, the question I ask sometimes people is, why are you doing it? Are you a professional powerlifter? Are you a weightlifter? Is there a medal that you're training for? Is there a competition that you're training for? And are you employed in your job because this is what you do, this is your the sport that you practice and what you're employed for to do powerlifting. So are you training for that? And if that is not the answer, then why are you lifting heavy? Because heavy lifting, as much as it can be very satisfying, of course it has its own drawbacks as well, and it has its own health and safety concerns. So the example I give to people for heavy lifting is like fast driving. If you are somebody who drives fast and says that I can maybe go from Bangalore to Delhi or any place or wherever you go, and you go very fast, the question to ask is, are you a professional racer? Is that why you're driving fast? Is there a prize for you waiting at the end like for a professional racer? If not, then why are you taking that chance? Because we do know that that one mistake can do something very wrong when you're driving something or riding something very fast. So the same way with heavy weights. If you're going to lift heavy and you're going to do heavy ego lifting, you have to ask, why am I lifting this heavy? Is there a purpose? Is there a medal waiting for me? If not, why am I taking this risk? Is it just because there are people around and I get impressed when they give that look? Somebody stares at me and thinks like, oh, that guy has lifted heavy. And that heavy lifting, if it is done, and if they look at you, are you going to earn something from it? Is there something that you gain? Do they get something benefit from your heavy lifting? So these are common sense questions that we have to ask, because the gym can be a very interesting place where we can train, get strong, do some good work, and you can go home. Or the gym can become something which can become very obsessive, and sometimes to show your particular skills, if we may call it, the gym can be one of those places where I lift heavy. Why are you lifting heavy is the first question. And for us, especially as strength and conditioning coaches, this is imperative. This is like, there's no negotiations. We have to know why somebody is being made to lift heavy. If you've got an athlete who's lifting heavy, you need to know why. In your own lifting, fair enough. You might lift heavy because you want to do ego lifting. That's fine, because you are not hired. There's nothing at stake. You want to break your back, it's your choice. But if you've got an athlete and you're breaking their back from saying, no, you have to lift, you have to do this, you have to lift heavy because that's how you get strong, then you need to know why. You have to have answers. We'll be getting to that point a bit more later on. So now you hopefully know what's the difference between ego lifting and competitive lifting. Is ego lifting good for the athlete? Would you allow some athlete who says, okay, today, sir, let's have some fun in the gym. Let's do some heavy squats. I just want to check how heavy I can lift. Should you allow that? He or she might say, it's just for fun, sir. I just want to know. I heard my friend squatted 95 kilos. I want to show that I can lift 100. I want to do it just once, sir, only once. Should you allow it? Because then they can put it on Instagram or Facebook or somewhere, and they can boast about it that I lifted 100. Lifting 100 kilos or 120 or 50. Is there a medal? What have you been hired for? What are you contracted as a strength and conditioning coach? Are you contracted to help this person lift more weight? Or are you contracted to help him lift or her to lift to improve their technical skills? So we have to sometimes know that to be professional, you have to let all this ego lifting and all the childishness, if we might call it, of athletes and ourselves too, we have to learn to keep it out of the gym. You are not in the gym to have fun. You are in the gym to train. Okay. So getting back to now bench press after the concept of ego lifting. Now we know how the bench press is done and the lift. Then coming to the deadlift now, the third lift. The deadlift is again a lift which is done from the floor. Okay, squat done from top down, bench press lying down. Deadlift is where a weight is lifted off from the floor. It's called a deadlift because it's dead weight. It's just there. You grab, you hold. Sometimes people have a grip which is one overhand, one underhand, so they are able to sort of retract their shoulders a bit better this way. Okay, they hold and they lift it up from the ground. So the aim is to take it up, stand, down. Same thing here, the referee will say start, the person will lift the weight, then the referee generally will keep their hands there and say down. That's when you put down. You don't just lift and put it down. Okay. Again, in deadlifts, there are two styles. Okay, there's one which is called the standard deadlift, which the feet are narrower. Somebody holds and their arms are outside their legs. They'll hold and come up. Okay, and then there's the other deadlift, which is called a sumo style deadlift. So the sumo style deadlift is called sumo style because, like the big Japanese wrestlers who are sumos, if you see when they are in their stance, when they get into the pushing match, they stand with their feet out really wide and they stand like this, and then they are sort of bending. You will not be able to see my legs, but I'm right now in a wide stance, and they go down and they sort of get into the circle and start pushing each other out. The start is that, so that's why it's called a sumo style deadlift. Now the sumo style deadlift, what does it do? A wider stance and the standard deadlift, which is a narrower stance. The sumo style, you will, like the bench press wide arm, same if we apply the concept to the legs, you are able to lift the bar from there to up and down at a shorter distance. And this style suits some people. Not all powerlifters use sumo style and not all use the standard style. Okay. So when your knees are closer, you are able to lift using a lot more quadricep strength. Okay, there's a lot more extension range that is happening at the hip joint. But when you lift, you have to travel more with the bar because the bar is traveling quite high and down. For some people, it suits them. For some people, the sumo style suits them. What suits you in powerlifting is what should be the heaviest weight you can lift with which particular style. So that is the reason why people use these two. Okay, they don't use a sumo style just to show that I'm doing something different or that it's cool. Okay, so this is something we need to remember as well, that a sumo style deadlift has a purpose to shorten. There's also a bit more bending in the sumo style which happens at the beginning. Okay, the knees are able to go out wide because there's a bar, so you're able to push your knees out. And then with the help of the adductors as well, and of course the glutes that come in, you lift and you put the bar down. Okay. Many a times in general weight training exercises, people do the sumo style squat. They will keep their knees out, and sometimes they might hold a kettlebell or maybe even a dumbbell and then do. So we need to know why certain movements are done from a joint angle point of view, more from a biomechanical point of view, which muscle is being loaded. Variation should not be done just for the sake of variations. If you're doing a wide stance, what is the purpose? Is it just because you're bored from doing narrow stance, or is there any other reason behind it? So this is something we need to have answers for, and in a few of the lectures I'll be talking about these questions. So deadlift, now we know what it is, we know what is the squat, we know what is the bench press. Do some reading about these lifts because these will definitely help you. Do watch some videos on the internet about these as well, because these are lifts you should know. Some of them really form the basis. Do you need to do this? Does everybody need? No. Does everybody not need? No. You have to be able to decide when to use this, how much to use this, how many times, how much benefit are you getting. This becomes the strength and conditioning coach's expertise that comes in. Okay. So we know the lifts now: squat, bench press, deadlift. Now just if we go to the next point, these are quick points. What is it that powerlifting lift tests? Your powerlifting test will be about your force. How much force can be produced? Is there speed involved in this? Obviously not. Okay. How much is the lifting that happens, the repetitions that they do in training? Okay, so I've written there, you can see it's 3.5, right? So that 3.5 you have to check. what is that? Is that the amount of repetitions they do in competitions? Obviously not. By now you should be knowing that this is a 1 repetition maximum lift. So the 3 to 5 reps is what they do in training. The reason why they do these heavy reps is because these low reps is because they want to be lifting close to what they would be lifting in competition. A powerlifter, if they end up doing 20 squats in one set, and even with the best technique with lighter weight, will that help them to do heavy when they have competition and they have to just do 1? And this is where the lecture about muscle fiber recruitment comes in. So they train in the 3 to max around 5 repetitions to stay close to the repetition range which helps them in competition. In competition, when you are doing that 1 repetition maximum with the max weight you can take, it is more to do with your fast twitch fiber recruitment. So they want to be training those. They don't want to be training their slow twitch fibers by doing high repetitions. Okay. Each lift in powerlifting, squat, there are 3 attempts. So you do it thrice, you do once, then you go, somebody else will do, you're called again second, third. The lift that passes, there can be a no lift, where you failed and done wrong, and then 2 which are good. So the best score from that is taken, the highest one. Okay. Sometimes if you fail all 3, then that's you've unfortunately failed. But most of the time people tend to be good. Some repetitions can be not correct. And one can be the technique, and one can also be that you just couldn't complete the lift. How couldn't you complete? You went down, while coming up you just couldn't. So then the spotters will just take the bar, and that's a failed attempt. Okay. Same goes in bench press. When you go down, okay, and you're sort of pushing up, you can't, that's a failed attempt. Okay. So there are 3 attempts each. 3 for the squat, 3 for the bench press, 3 for the deadlift. Now range wise, what is this range? Is it the same as weightlifting, which we'll be covering in the next lecture? Weightlifting, you take a bar from down, basically with 2 different styles of lifting, you'll be taking it up to the highest point it can. Does powerlifting do that? Is the weight going up? Obviously no, it's a short range. Okay, so the bench press is a short range, squat is a short range, the deadlift is again a short range, just the bar goes hardly in the deadlift from floor to around knee height, just above knee height and back. Squat is from standing just to your hip to your knee, and so on. So the bar doesn't travel much. Okay, so it's a short range movement. What is the other sort of feature of powerlifting? It is not in the Olympics. Okay, and I think, if I'm not wrong, many years ago, around 2-3 decades ago, if I'm not wrong, I'm not too aware of it, but it was tried to be pushed into the Olympics, and if I'm not wrong, it was done as a demo or as a participatory sport, but I don't think it has made it in powerlifting. So it's not an Olympic sport. Okay, but it is very popular. There are competitions that keep happening of this, and again, a lot of strength these guys possess. And one of the things you will notice with those who are into these type of strength sports, one of the signs is they have these calluses on the hands, just from the lifting regular. If you know a powerlifter who's professional, you will just check that this just becomes very, very hard for powerlifters, just from the gripping the barbells, which have that, I think it's called knurling, which is around the grips which are tight for getting a good grip. And when you keep grabbing that constant lifting, even regular guys can have it, who lift weights just for general fitness and stuff, but powerlifters is almost no choice because you're carrying that skin. Some of them might even get cuts because the skin goes hard, and then over time, sometimes that skin can just cut a bit. Your knees sometimes get scraped while lifting. So these are very interesting things to know. Okay, you might not use a powerlifting lift for some athletes, like maybe a table tennis player, you might never have to lift that much. A shooter, you might never have to know. But you are not only a strength and conditioning coach for a shooter, or for table tennis, or for sports that don't require maybe huge amounts of force. You have to be knowing what to do when somebody comes to you from a strength sport. Okay, and somebody who's maybe a javelin thrower, or somebody who's a shot putter, a big guy, and you should be having the knowledge of what they require. And in my personal opinion, I think for a strength and conditioning coach, this is my belief, and I really like the challenge of working with somebody who's a strength athlete, because you really need to know what to do when these big guys are there who lift massive weights. You cannot tell them that, okay, take a TheraBand and do internal external rotation and take some 5 kilo dumbbells and you do something, which is very generic applying. These are guys who want to lift heavy weights and they know that that is a must for their sport. So how can you add to that little bit which they can lift more? And this is where you really have to, I feel, is my personal opinion, as a strength coach, you should really be knowing what to do when heavy weights are involved. What are the calculations that are required? What are the lifting techniques? What are the positioning techniques? Because if somebody comes who's really into heavy lifting, who knows how to do a heavy squat, and as a strength coach you do not know what to do with that, okay, then are you really a strength coach? Or are you just a coach who can work with people who don't lift very heavy? So you have to be able to fit in anywhere and to be able to design workouts according to what people need. It is not just you are calling yourself a strength and conditioning coach and you don't know what to do when somebody who wants to lift heavy to improve in a sport that requires massive amounts of brute force. If you are not able to help there, then how are you a strength and conditioning coach? So you should know how to help. Okay, you should have this knowledge so you know exactly what to pick from which basket for your athletes. Okay, so there's a basket of bodybuilding, there's a basket of powerlifting, and there's a basket of weight lifting, which we'll be talking about. But you should know what to take from each, what not to take as well, and what to take from other aspects of training as well. Okay, but you need to know, you need to first know what's in the basket to be able to pick what you want. So this becomes important from a knowledge perspective, and hope this lecture has been helpful. Again, a reminder, do your research on why powerlifting squats are done with a wider stance. This will be in the questions. Hopefully this lecture has helped you to understand what is powerlifting and how to incorporate some of the positive sides of it into your own training. Thank you.